Welcome to the Business of Story, where we connect you with the leading minds in the art of business storytelling. Learn from best-selling authors, Hollywood screenwriters, makers, content marketers, and brand raconteurs on how to craft and tell compelling stories that sell. The Business of Story is brought to you by Emma, which provides innovative email marketing tools and services that drive brilliant results. And by Convince and Convert, digital marketing advisors and counselors to leading brands and organizations worldwide. Convince and Convert helps you gain and keep your customers online. Here's your host, Park Howell.
Welcome back to Business of Story. I'm Park Howell, and it is completely awesome to have you here with me today. I don't know what you're doing. Are you out mowing the lawn? Are you riding your bike? Are you on a treadmill? Are you playing hooky? Whatever it is, I really appreciate you including me in your life for this next 40-minute interview. Business of Story, we have another amazing story artist, Michael Stelzner, the founder, CEO of Social Media Examiner. And it's going to be a fun show today because, often when we're talking about storytelling, we're talking about it through literature, movies, brand development, that sort of thing. But we're going to the online world, the virtual world, where we all are telling stories from 140 characters to blog posts, to this podcast, to vlogs, to Facebook Live, to whatever. But I often think about, how do you get customer engagement when your whole world is an online world? And that's what Social Media Examiner does, of course. They've been coaching folks since 2009 how to use social media to grow their enterprise. But today, Mike Stelzner is going to talk about how you create experiences around events and social media, especially how they do a social media marketing world, to get people to live into this story, have a ball with this story, and then share it, of course, with their world online. And we talk about that whole construct of brands not being storytellers, but story makers. And in this case, that's what he's talking about, these stories and these events and these experiences that they make around social media to get their folks to live these stories and tell them online to their customers. So it's a really fun show. It's a little bit different take on Business of Story than we typically have here, and it's going to be really fascinating for you. I want you to listen in. And before we get started, just want to remind you, too, that I have a host of tools for you at businessofstory.com and our new all-interactive storytelling workbook. We actually launched this at Social Media Marketing World when I was giving a storytelling presentation back in March of this year. And now we've added great ammunition to it. We've beefed it up. It's all interactive. You can download the PDF. You can craft your story inside of it using the 10-step story cycle process. There are videos that go along with each step, so you can watch and learn as you go along. And I'm just trying to make it as easy as possible because, people will not buy into your brand story until you absolutely own it. And you own it by clarifying your story, what it means to the people around you, how your brand backs it up with how it delivers on its promises within its stories, and how it really humanizes the product or service offering, especially in the B2B world. That's what business storytelling is all about, and that's my mission in life, is to help you get there quicker, faster. You can use this on yourself. You can use it on your brand. You can use it for career development. You can use it to get your kids to eat their peas, for crying out loud. That's right. Because what we want to do here at Business of Story is reignite within you the one true superpower we all possess, and that is the power of story. So visit businessofstory.com, and I've got a ton of tools there just waiting for you, some of them free, and there's a little investment for that interactive workbook. You're going to love it. I guarantee it. So, all right, that's enough to do about me, and let's move on to this show with an amazing guest, a gentleman who's really, really busy. So I'm very proud and honored to have him on the program today. Michael Stelzner, the CEO and founder of Social Media Examiner. Let's go to the show. Hey, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Park.
Man, it's great having you here. We got a chance to chat a little bit earlier this year, and you were kind enough to have me on your podcast right before Social Media Marketing World, and I'm so happy now to return the favor and have you here on Business of Story.
Well, it's my absolute pleasure to be here and hopefully provide some great value to your listeners.
Well, now for some of those listeners that may not know about you, and I'm sure that's only one, two, or three, let's really get focused here. Tell us a little bit about your background, and then I've got to ask you too, because it seems like such a time warp for me that one of your first books came out in 2006, and in social media marketing years, isn't that like about 2 centuries ago?
Yes. Well, it's a great story. So prior to Social Media Examiner, I wrote a book called Writing White Papers, and I was the guy that people went to try to figure out how to write these things, which were article meets brochure. And I was really helping big businesses and tech companies figure out how to connect with their customers. And it was all about solving problems in long form copy and hopefully getting people a little further down the sales cycle. Around 2008 is when I started noticing Twitter really take off. So I started bringing some of the experts that I quote unquote knew at the time to my world and started introducing possibly how they could use social media, they meaning my audience, to get their white papers more seen, if you will. And it turned out that when I started talking about social media to these predominantly business to business marketers, they kind of like ate it like candy. And that just became the beginning of me getting these crazy ideas in my head that I wonder if I should start an experiment. And I Googled socialmediaexaminer.com thinking that there's no way I would ever be able to get that domain. Sure enough, it was available. Immediately, what went through my mind, Park, was that I was going to get sued from the San Francisco Examiner, so I trademarked it almost immediately, and the rest is history.
So, from white papers to Twitter to Social Media Examiner, is that basically how it went down? So,
that's how it went down. That's the short version of the story. There's obviously a lot more to it.
Yeah, but I mean, kind of an organic growth. You help them with their white papers, just a better way to communicate through content, long form content, and then promoting those through the white papers through Twitter, and then one thing led to another, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I was doing, back then I was doing a newsletter that went out every month to about 20,000 subscribers. And in the newsletter, this is back when you used to do e-zines, and I'm probably dating myself here, but when you would actually have the articles inside the newsletter, and I went out to people and I persuaded them to write for my newsletter because I had this big following, quote unquote. And so we were publishing articles inside of email. And of course, that just opened up opportunities to start doing more training. And eventually I ended up doing some online training in the form of what we called success summits. And I did one back in, I forget, early 2009 called Social Media Success Summit, which was an online conference for my copywriting audience about how they could be successful with social media. The guy that was my keynote was a guy by the name of Gary Vaynerchuk, who just happened to have just had his baby, so I moved my entire conference for him. And we had about 600 people register, and somebody who had a private island in this software called Second Life had a party in Second Life, and it was just like this big to-do, and it was like, wow, what have I tapped here, So then I started Social Media Examiner, and the thing just kind of exploded.
Yeah, and you just had Gary as your keynote speaker at Social Media Marketing World this past spring.
Yeah, and he has definitely gone some pretty far distance.
So you've got nearly, 500,000 email subscribers that get original content from you all every single day. You've got one of the, if not the largest social media marketing conference in the world, in which you had 3,500 attendees or something like that. And now you're just about ready to launch in October. Not launch, but have this year's Social Media Success Summit. Back when you started all this in 2009, did you envision this getting to be where it is today in 2016?
Never. I thought this was just going to be, honestly, an experiment, and I'm an experimenter, and I just figured I'd try this out for a couple months and see what happens. And I honestly thought it had a 3-year shelf life. Back in 2009, October of 2009, when I launched it, I thought to myself, okay, I'll give this thing 3 years, and I'll be shocked if it lasts more than 3 years, because I just figured social media was going to be a fad. Mm-hmm. And now it's totally grown, and it's got a life of its own. And we expect to have 4,000 people at Social Media Marketing World next spring. And the sky's the limit, obviously. And I feel really blessed about it.
Well, that's awesome. In the early days, we always like to ask our guests, when you were getting on a roll with this thing, was there that point where it's like all of a sudden starting to blow up around you? And maybe not even in the best of ways. I mean, you start something, we all try to take on an endeavor, and then the universe seems to push back on us. Can you recount one of those tales in your early days, like, man, I'm not sure this is worth it or this is going to make it, and you almost gave up, but you got over that hurdle and you got it to where it is today?
Well, I'd like to tell people that I'm a 20-year overnight success, Park, because I started my first business back in 1996 and have had many different things, come and go. And I kind of look at all the work that I've been doing over the last 20 years has kind of led me to where I am today. When I started Social Media Examiner, by that point, it was probably my fourth major initiative that I had done in 20 years. And for some reason, I struck gold with that one. And that one really just exploded faster than I could have ever imagined. I had about 10,000 email subscribers in the first couple of months. For me, it was kind of almost like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? More than because in the beginning, it was just me and a volunteer and a couple other people, and it just kind of exploded. I had people in 3 months into this venture wanting to buy the business. And I just kind of, for me, the struggles that I faced were growing pains, really just not having a big enough vision back then to see what this could become and needing a lot more people to kind of help me make it a reality. So, it was a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of really, really hard work. And for me, it was just methodical saying no, because that was my struggle. Everybody wanted a little piece of me back then, and I just had to say no to everything in order to stay focused within my means. So, but I never really did face one of those kind of struggles. But I did have something happen, Park, about 3 years ago. I thought, well, I did it in the white paper world and I did it in the social media world. I'm going to do it again in the parenting world. And this time I want to be the next Walt Disney. I had crazy, audacious dreams, and I started this thing called mykidsadventures.com. And this time around, I faced a lot of struggles, and I invested enormous amounts of money. Actually, I did a blog post called My $300,000 Mistake. And I learned that I couldn't necessarily go into a space that I had absolutely no experience in and expect the same kind of results. And I just found my house divided. Here I had in one hand this really awesome thing called Social Media Examiner, and I had in the other hand this thing that was kind of a passion project that was distracting me from my real mission. I ended up shutting down the My Kids Adventures site. Well, I kept the site up, but I shut down the initiative and just refocused on Social Media Examiner and really learned a very hard lesson that I cannot be in many places at once. And in some regards, the idea of, dividing yourself is not necessarily the path to success.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. And obviously the passion project that probably was spurred on by your own kids. And so you jumped into it, loved it, following your heart, but then sounds like the wheels kind of started shaking on the overall Michael Stelzner buggy.
Yeah, exactly. If you go too far down a rabbit trail, you might get stuck, right?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you one thing that you guys do really, really well are experiences. And I love this dichotomy of online social media marketing. The virtual world meets experiences to get people to talk about. So on today's show, let's cover that a little bit. And how do you all go about that, creating experiences that people are going to talk about? And a friend of mine out in Florida told me once, and I love this, he says, brands really aren't storytellers, brands are story makers. The customers are the storytellers. And that's kind of the way I look at this. When you're creating these experiences, you are making these brand stories that people can buy into and then make them so special. You get them to share them online and off to build your world. So how do you guys go about that? Do you have a special focus on it?
Well, definitely. Social media marketing world, which is coming up on its fifth year, has always been about creating almost what we call internally a Disney World-like experience or a Disneyland-like experience. And we try very, very hard to create such an incredible experience for people that they start telling stories about this experience spontaneously and everywhere. And that is really one of our key marketing initiatives, is to create something that empowers people to really share amazing stories. So for us, it really starts even before somebody decides to come to the conference. So it starts with basic branding. So for example, if you visit our site, you'll see networking, discovery, and fun is kind of our slogan. And we have this really killer video that showcases kind of what the entire experience is all about. And it's designed, carefully crafted, if you will, to, and you were even saying before we got on here that you were reliving your experience watching.
I was, yep.
It's really designed to kind of showcase what the experience will be like for someone who comes to the event. And then what's really cool, Park, one of the things that we do is immediately after someone purchases, we actually encourage them to begin sharing their excitement. And it starts with, on our thank you page, we have a simple thing that says, first book your hotel and then share your excitement. Click here to tweet that you're attending. And I got to tell you, this is something that anybody who is selling anything that has any level of excitement for their customers can do. Because after someone's finally decided to make a purchase, they're generally pretty pumped that they're going to be either attending or receiving something. And it's at that moment that you can just simply say, share your excitement. And we use click to tweet, and we just have a simple little tweet that they craft that says something along the lines of, I'm excited to be attending Social Media Marketing World. We put a hashtag in it. And then what we do as the conference comes into full gear, we aggregate all those hashtags into a little widget on our sales page, and people begin to see all these people saying that they're excited coming to the event. Mm-hmm. And that kind of begins the creation of their story. And we take it even further, Park, by going out of our way to enable these people to connect in so many different ways. For example, we have something we did last year, which we've never done before, is we created Slack groups. And I think we had, 40 different groups around different kinds of topics. And people were able to interact with each other, for example, around analytics. So we've got a bunch of analytics geeks that loves to come to this conference. And we have someone facilitate that group who happens to be one of the speakers. And by the time these people came to the conference, they kind of felt like they already developed friends along these common interests. And we do the same thing with private groups, which people can do on Facebook or they can do on LinkedIn. And it's really just all about, we thought to ourselves, what's missing from most events? You just show up and then you're expected to create your own story. Well, we decided we were going to put the guide rails in place and kind of help people start creating their stories and experiences before they even showed up.
And give them the tools to share those then too. So they're getting
Absolutely.
that social proof, that excitement around it, and then sharing it out with their world. So that's very cool. I can tell you from firsthand experience, you were kind enough to have me come out and do a storytelling session, did a 90-minute session on the Sunday before the big event started. And I remember standing there on stage, and they just kept opening up the ballroom. It got bigger and bigger and bigger. I think we ended up with over 600 people in there, but I was standing there waiting for them to show up, and I thought, where is everybody? And I walked out, check out the hallway, and here they were, all in line, waiting to get in. And what struck me about that line was the energy in it. People weren't just standing around like tired from flying from around the world to get here to your event. I mean, they were pumped up, and I had not seen that in an event before, where people that early on were that pumped and ready to go for the workshop. And I think that has a lot to do with that pre-building of the story and that pre-event. You also make it real easy to get in touch and understand who your speakers are going to be there. Can you talk a little bit about how do you start intertwining those two worlds between speaker and guest?
Well, there's a lot of things that we do. First of all, a lot of times we'll ask speakers, hey, would you like to give us a little audio clip? And we will use that audio clip, for example, or video clip on our Facebook event page, or we might sew that into our podcast. A lot of times we'll even bring our speakers onto the podcast. They're going to be speaking at the conference to kind of get our audience to become familiar with who they are, which, I think that's part of what's exciting about going to an event is when you feel like you know people, you want to go to an event because you know these people and you've had a chance to experience them already. There's just so much stuff we do. I mean, it's not even. We also do lots of email communication with all of our attendees. But the point of the matter is that I think that anybody who's listening right now, who has any kind of customers, can kind of create through a strategic, thoughtful process a way of getting people super excited and pumped about whatever they're about to experience. And then, of course, you better deliver on that experience.
Well, and you do a nice job of that. I think one of the first nights out, we were on the USS Midway for quite a show. Why don't you take us through some of the different events that you host there? So, again, what I loved about it is it's not just about the online world, but it's the world that people are interacting with right then and there that connect them.
Well, part of what you want to try to do is wow people, right? So you want to kind of exceed expectations, which is hard to do when your product is known for already exceeding expectations because people already come in with high expectations. But one of the things that's kind of exciting that we do is we actually lease an aircraft carrier, which was the largest ship in the world until like the 60s. And once people walk onto that aircraft carrier, that's a pretty incredible experience alone. But we hand them networking bingo cards. And I don't know if you remember this, Park, or not, but basically they're these little cards that immediately immerse you into an environment where it's designed to enable you to get to know the people that are around you. And it's just simple little questions like find somebody who is from another country, or find somebody who owns Facebook stock, or find somebody who used to own an Atari 2600, just random kind of stuff. And immediately you have this connection happening between strangers, and it brings the introverts out of their shell, and it just kind of allows people to have a lot of fun immediately, kind of the official night before everything kicks off.
Yeah. Now, what do you do with leaderboards, or do you have any sort of in-event app that you use that you get people really involved with?
Yeah, we do all sorts of stuff actually during the event, which I think a lot of people could learn from. One of them is that we actually have a dedicated team of people we call ambassadors, networking ambassadors, and their job is to help you find whoever you're looking for. And we actually have an embassy where you can walk up and you can say, okay, I'm looking for this kind of person. And we search through the database to try to find these people and actually coordinate those kinds of connections. Everybody gives us their cell number when they register. So we will actually call on someone's cell phone or text them and say, hey, there's somebody here from this company who's interested in meeting you. Would you be interested? And we facilitate all that kind of stuff. We also used a really cool app that allowed people to tag people that they want to meet and also send them private messages. That was Bizabo. But we also, one of the cool things that we do is we encourage people to tweet. And we used another app, which for the life of me, I'm forgetting what the name of the app is. But what it did was it would aggregate all the people that were the most proficient tweeters, if you will, into a leaderboard. And every day during the keynotes, we would show who is on the leaderboard to all the people that are inside the audience. So that kind of creates a little bit of an excitement because everybody who's competitive says, I want to get on that leaderboard, I want my face up there. So all of a sudden people start tweeting like crazy. And we ended up having 70,000 tweets during our event. And we ended up trending globally through the entire duration of the event on Twitter, which is pretty amazing. So, what that does is it's engaging people because the competitors are coming out to compete, but it also gets some great PR for us for the event because people are talking about this event all over the place. And Park, some of the psychology that's at play here is if you get people to take actions to express excitement throughout the entire sales process, the chances of them actually loving the product are going to go up, and I think that's kind of fun. And that's a lesson I think anybody could do for any kind of product or event.
Now, when you started selling tickets for this, did you just kind of learn as you went along, or did you rely on a process? Did you have to, I was just looking at Jeff Walker's product launch formula, for instance. I mean, did you guys just learn this by the seat of your pants, or did you go to an expert to help you with this stuff?
This is not stuff that anybody taught us.
Okay.
This is stuff that we just kind of figured out. I don't know how to say this, but I'm like, I watch everything that all of my friends do. And also I watch things in other industries. For example, I found in a totally different industry, somebody had this thing called convince the boss letter. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to do that. So we wrote a little letter for anybody that needed to convince their boss, and this is something anybody can do for any product that's complicated is, hey, not, you need to convince your boss, click here for a pre-crafted letter and a flyer.
Is this convince your boss to pay the fee and send you out to social media marketing world? Is that what you mean?
Exactly.
I love it.
Because it's like, we began hearing objections. So we're like, and we began seeing these things. So we're like, okay. And then another thing that we learned along the way is that simple things like countdown timers make a difference. We started experimenting with countdown timers when our sales are on, and all of a sudden our sales started going up. So for me, I'm just a voracious experimenter. Mm-hmm. I do have a background with a master's in communication, so I do understand psychology and copywriting and all that fun stuff, but I've just kind of over time began to pick up little best practices and pluck them from here and there. And the thing that mattered the most, what I discovered the most, if you're trying to sell an event, there's no better way to sell an event than to activate the people that are at the event, to help evangelize the next event. Because the hardest thing in the world is to get people to come physically to any place, right? Because they usually have to fly, they have to get a hotel, then they've got to pay for the airfare. So I just knew that if we could create an incredible experience that exceeds people's expectation for both networking, for the content itself, and for the fun component, that they would just be talking about it constantly. And Park, to my great surprise, I listen to lots of podcasts, including yours. And I cannot tell you how many times I've heard you and many other people mention social media marketing world. Yeah. That becomes very powerful marketing when all of a sudden all these podcasts and all these blogs are just constantly referencing either a person they met at social media marketing or an experience they had or some content they picked up. And that's what you want with any kind of product that you create. But in order to do that, you need to create an environment where people walk away feeling like they've almost had a religious experience,
Well, the one other thing, and that was the first time I'd been at your event was last year or earlier this year, I guess, in spring. And the other thing and I've been to a lot of events. I've had to produce a lot of events for clients. And so I've been around that. The other thing that struck me about social media marketing world, you had mentioned them earlier, your volunteers or your ambassadors. Number one, you had a lot of them. They were very knowledgeable on what was going on, but their energy was quite contagious. And you don't often find that in volunteers. How do you have a secret sauce that we can learn from when we've got volunteers helping us out? How do you get them that engaged? Yeah,
well, first of all, you have to have a product that people want to participate in, ideally, right? So ideally, or a reputation. Right. So if this is your first time doing an event or doing some sort of a product, you have a reputation and someone wants to be affiliated with that reputation. In our particular case, people have heard about our event, but many could not afford to come. So what we did was we would identify people that we thought had the right kind of attitude, if you will. A servant kind of mindset. They're willing to come and they're willing to put on a smile and really help people and understand the value of service. And they would get a free ticket in exchange for committing a number of hours to our conference. Some of that stuff was pre-event. Some of that stuff was at the actual event itself. What we did for all those people, and there was probably about 150 people that were working the event, and I'd say about 100 of them were volunteers. So we put them through extensive training. We brought in experts to talk about what it means to serve. And I got up on the stage and talked about the value of really being there to help other people and how you will find so much great value out of it. And we taught them very simple principles like don't ever point to where something is, actually walk people there. We have extensively internally studied organizations like Chick-fil-A and Nordstrom and many others that are really, excellent on service, Marriott. And we, basically just apply a lot of those principles to the kind of experience. We tell people that we want enough people so that no matter what, nobody has to look very far to find what we call a white shirt, which is somebody wearing the staff shirts. And when the whole thing is done, everybody is applauding the white shirts, and the white shirts feel like they've had this just most amazing experience in their life. So it really is just kind of unifying everybody around some sort of a common vision. And it turns out a lot of those volunteers end up coming to become employees of the company, or they just come back every year because they just love the experience. So.
Is there something that you experienced this year with your event that is going to add to the storytelling or the story creation for next year's event? Any sort of insight you'd like to share?
Yeah. Well, you know what? We made Park, the first year you were there, which is in 2016, was our first move to a convention center. And the big fear was to move from a hotel to a convention center, where we now have like 4 different hotels, right? Is scary, especially a convention center that houses the International Comic-Con, right? Which is hundreds of thousands of people. So to move to such a monstrously big venue and still create a quote unquote intimate experience was one of our scary fears, Mm-hmm. But I walked out of that conference so pumped, Park, that, oh my gosh, we did it. That we had this crazy expansion plan now in place for 2017 all the way through 2019. And one of the things that we're going to be doing in the future is we want social media marketing world to be more than just a place for marketers that are wanting to learn social media. We also are going to dramatically expand for the content creator audience. So one thing you're going to see in 2017 is you're going to see a lot more sessions on podcasting, blogging, YouTube, and live video. So we're going to have at least 40 sessions on that content, which will be about a third of all of our content, because we believe that social media is critical, but a key part of social media is creating the actual content that fuels a lot of the social media side of things. And, I think storytelling is obviously going to be a bigger part of that. And I'm very hopeful, Park, you will be coming back. I've not yet asked you. You don't have to answer now. But I am super excited about where it's headed. One of the things that I'm really stoked about is the live video side of things. Live video, which is things like Facebook Live and Periscope and so on and so forth, I think is going to become a much bigger part of the marketer's tool chest, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I'm super excited to see how that space will evolve in the coming years as well.
Mike, let's hold on that thought for just a moment. I'd like to take a quick break for our sponsors' stories. And when we come back, if I could pick your brain on 2 or 3 things that you see that might be happening online, really taking off online between now and social media marketing world next year that we should all be looking at in the next 6 months. So let's cover that right after this. Hey, if you like what you're hearing here on Business of Story, then you are going to love Definitive, the email from Convince and Convert that many marketers say is the most useful resource around. Each day, the team at Convince and Convert picks a topic and sends you the 3 best resources ever created about that topic. It's topical, it's timely, it's useful, so go to definitivedigest.com and subscribe for free right now. Hey, I've got a question for you. What's the best call to action button color on your website? Yeah, you probably didn't see that one coming, did you? Well, what's the best shape and sizes of your CTA buttons? And what copy gets more clicks? These questions have interrupted my sleep patterns for weeks now, until I downloaded a helpful new email marketing guide from Emma called Why We Click: The Psychology Behind a Great Call to Action. You'll learn how applying just a little bit of brain science can transform your CTA buttons into small but mighty conversion powerhouses. It covers the button color, copy, and placement that helps skyrocket click rates. Check it out at myemma.com/click. Emma helps marketers everywhere send smart, stylish email newsletters, promotions, and automated campaigns, and to help us all rest a little easier knowing our email marketing is doing its job. So check out their new publication at myemma.com/click. You, like all business leaders and communicators, have an important brand story to tell, but it's probably not being heard. There's just too much competition for our attention, unless, of course, you tell a better story. For over a year now, I have connected you with more than 50 international story artists through this podcast to help you craft your ideal brand story for the growth of your enterprise and your people. Did you know I'm also available to you for speaking engagements, brand and leadership story workshops, even for one-on-one Skype or telephone brand story strategy consults? Plus, you can begin clarifying your brand story right now by downloading the interactive DIY workbook at businessofstory.com. You see, your sales don't have to be comedies or tragedies. You can make them epic by clarifying your brand story and connecting with audiences and customers like never before. So download your workbook today at businessofstory.com. And if you're not 100% satisfied, I'll happily refund your money. And one last thought. Just remember, the most potent story you ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a good one, my friends. Story on. Welcome back to Business of Story, and our guest today, Michael Stelzner, the founder of Social Media Examiner, a guy that's been doing this since 2009, thought it was going to be a little 3-year stint, and now look at him. He runs only the largest social media conference in the world in San Diego, as well as one coming up, Social Media Success Summit, coming up in October online. And I had the privilege of meeting Michael and being on his show. In fact, you had me on your podcast, Social Media Marketing Podcast, the Friday before Social Media Marketing World. And my wife and I rarely listen to myself on my own shows, let alone others. I don't know, there's just something about that I should probably get over. But my wife and I were listening to that on the way over. We were driving over from Phoenix Friday morning when it came out. And I was sort of petrified driving along, and she was listening. About 2/3 of the way in, she goes, "You sound pretty smart." So thank you. And I got to tell you, it's still one of the top referring sites, podcast to Business of Story. So thank you very much for that. I got a lot of visibility because of you and the power of story. I like to say if content is king, then story is the sorcerer. It's the kingdom sorcerer to really make stuff happen. But
That's awesome.
So what do you see that's on the horizon, between now and next year when you're on stage? What should we be looking at? Video was a big part of the theme this year. Where do you see it going from there?
Well, obviously, video is going to continue to grow. I think that a lot of social media marketers are going to begin revisiting YouTube. I think that as we begin, I kind of say YouTube is like the sleeping giant that's finally woke up and begun to realize, hey, this video thing, especially this live video thing, doesn't have to be a Facebook and Twitter thing. So I think as YouTube rolls out their YouTube Live for the mobile app, which is going to be coming very soon, we're going to begin to see YouTube as a major player. One of the big challenges that a lot of marketers are facing right now is the scary word that I'm about to say, which is algorithms. So many of the social networks are now basically filtering out marketing content, simply said. Almost every social network now has got an algorithm. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and just about everything else you can possibly imagine. So I've been screaming, the algorithms are coming, because the reality is it's going to make our life as marketers a lot harder, because the days of our organic content being seen at no cost are essentially coming to a hard stop. So I think that the way to counteract that is to create some sort of content that people want to subscribe to, Park. Podcasting obviously is a beautiful example of that. Another example of that would be to create some sort of a blog, right, where people want to put their email on a list and get notifications every time that post comes out. And of course, creating some sort of a video show is another way to do it. But the idea that once people, quote unquote, subscribe to your either spoken or written or video content, they will bypass algorithms essentially, because they will be wanting to get that content delivered on a regular basis. And I think we're going to see a rebirth of content, the creation of content. Another thing that is on the horizon is this little war between Snapchat and Instagram. As you probably know, Facebook tried to buy Snapchat, and that did not work. So they just decided, well, we're going to go ahead and reinvent, if you will, the features and functions that make Snapchat unique, but we're going to deliver those through Instagram. And the early salvo of that is Instagram stories. And eventually, Instagram also has something equivalent to Snapchat Live, which is live event coverage. And I think we're just going to see Instagram grow into this network that is much more than just simply pictures and short videos. And I think that is kind of an exciting thing, because whenever two successful social networks decide to do battle, the people that benefit the most are the consumers. And I think that there'll be some really exciting opportunities that come for marketers as a result of this. So I strongly recommend people kind of keep an eye on that.
Can I go back to your thought when you said rebirth of content? It seems like content courses everywhere. What do you mean more specifically, I guess? Because everyone seems like they're creating content, but is it how you...
Well, let me, when I say the rebirth of content, I don't know how long you've been in this space, Park, but I remember a day when blogs were kind of the thing. And that was the way that you went out and you connected with people. Blogging has kind of become, not so popular anymore. Most people aren't even thinking about blogging anymore. So that's an example of a content that I think is going to see a resurgence or new growth. Instead, what people are doing right now is they're publishing their content on LinkedIn and on Facebook. They're not actually publishing on a platform that they call their own. And I think a lot of marketers are going to wake up to the fact that they need to own their home ground, if you will, and they need to have a place where they can drive people that is their home. And they're going to have to pay to drive people there in the beginning. They're going to have to pay Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. But once people come to love that content and consume that content on a platform that we can call our own, I think we're going to see a lot more growth. Podcasting is also something that I think is stagnated a little bit. I don't see a lot of people as excited about podcasting as they were a couple of years ago when Serial came out. So I think both of these are great examples of things that most people are kind of poo-pooing. And even YouTube. A lot of marketers are not thinking about going out and starting, any kind of video-based show. So instead what people are doing is they're creating still images and short video content and publishing those on the social networks. And I think what we're going to see is a moving back to creating content in a way and in a place that we can call our home.
That's really interesting. Back to the future. I started my blog. in 2008. And it got to about 2012, 13, and it felt like, what am I doing? Is anyone paying any attention? But I've still been cranking through it. Also, posting on LinkedIn, Medium, and some of those other platforms. But it's interesting to hear that it's kind of come back to owning your own playfield again.
It's got to be. Yeah. Because look, anybody who knows anything about history when it comes to social media knows it always starts out free. They lure you in like the siren on the hill, right? With the promise of exposure or traffic. And then eventually they flip switch it and they say, okay, we're now going to charge you. And in the end, those that decide to play ball in the early days can be quite successful, but it's not a sustainable long-term plan. That's why, having a podcast that is ultimately fed from your own website and having a blog that's fed from your website and having video that is on your own website are all things that you can control. And instead of going for big numbers, I think we're going to see a lot of marketers going for the smaller micro niche communities. And we're not going to worry so much about the number of fans we have. We're going to worry about how many customers we have. We're going to go back to, does it really matter if only 1,000 people listen? Because I only need 100 customers to be successful, right? I think that you're going to see a lot of this kind of back to the basics stuff coming out of the marketing industry. Now,
you were using Blab quite a lot, and it's kind of pulled back now. I mean, what did you see happen?
Blab is dead,
there?
yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. Blab is dead, and I saw the writing on the wall. And, I'm always going to have a live show. And I should mention, I do have a weekly live show called Morning Social Media Marketing Talk. And people can find it at socialmediaexaminer.com/live. But we have moved that platform to platform to platform because for us, it's not about where it lives. It's about how you get to it. So, it used to be on Blab, and then we moved it over to Facebook, and now it lives on Huzza.io. And if Huzza goes out of business, we'll move it somewhere else, The point of the matter is we've got a place on Social Media Examiner where people can add it to their Google Calendar, and we just update that Google Calendar and say, this is where you go for the live show. And as long as they're subscribed to our Google Calendar, then they'll know where to go. Because there is a bit of a tumultuous uprising, if you will, in the world of multiple guest live shows. There's just a question of what the future is going to be because Google Hangouts on Air also is shutting down effective September 12th. So there's a lot of questions as to where we're all going to go for these kinds of shows.
Well, and you had made a comment, I think, from the stage, and we were talking about this before, where on your live show that you were happy with 50 people initially because these were 50 really interested people. It's not like you had to attract the entire world in, and I don't know what you're up to now, but that also goes back to something to me that Joe Polizzi said about you don't need to have 9 different channels going. Have one and do it really, really well. I think we all get trapped in this big intergalactic world wide web thinking we need to speak to everyone in the world when we really need to find who that audience is, understand the story that they're living into, and then meet them on their terms with the content that can help them achieve what they ultimately want to achieve.
Oh, totally. And right now our live show maybe has, I don't know, it's probably about 1,000 people that are watching the live show across Facebook and the other platform, but it's still relatively small compared to the size of our audience, right? Which is, we're talking many millions. But you're right. In the end, we only need about 6,000 people in a year to be a customer for us to be very successful out of many millions. And I think a lot of marketers need to stop worrying about the vanity metrics and start thinking about the metrics that really matter, which is, what's going to pay the bills, what's going to keep the lights on,
The customer metrics. Yes.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, Mike, thank you so much. I know you've got a ton on your plate, and I really appreciate you coming and taking the time to be on Business of Story, and look forward to seeing you online and hopefully see you over in San Diego here next spring.
Thank you, Park. It's my absolute pleasure, and I love your show. Keep up the great work.
And how can people learn more about you and what you all are doing?
Socialmediaexaminer.com. You go there, you'll find all of my podcasts, my live show, the conference, the whole darn thing is there.
The whole darn thing. Well, thanks again. And thank you all for listening to this edition of Business of Story. Be sure to come back next week when we have another amazing story artist like Mike with us to help us all understand how best to craft and tell compelling brand stories that sell. If you like what you're hearing here, Business of Story, please visit us over at iTunes and let us know. Give us a rating and share it with your world. We really appreciate it. And of course, for any tools that you can use, free downloadable tools and our interactive Story Cycle Workbook, go to businessofstory.com. It's a place that you can really start owning your brand story. And as I like to say, people will not buy into your story until you own it first. And that all comes with clarifying your story. So please visit us at businessofstory.com. Plenty of free downloadable tools, a podcast, a blog, my very own blog, still going since 2008, and it's all there for the taking. So thank you again for listening, and until next Monday, have a wonderful life.
Thanks for tuning in to The Business of Story. Don't forget there are terrific free storytelling resources for you at thebusinessofstory.com, where you'll also find the complete show archive. The Business of Story is sponsored by Emma and by Convince and Convert, and is produced by Convince and Convert Media. Find more great shows like The Business of Story at marketingpodcasts.com, the first search engine for marketing podcasts. Podcast imaging by AudioBag.com.